Welcome to the a16z podcast. I'm Michael Copeland, and I'm here today with Benedict Evans. Benedict.
Hello.
And Andreessen Horowitz partner Zal Bellamoria.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good. So we're going to talk today about the future of television, and I know you guys are going to disagree from the get-go on what television actually is, or if that's the right way to describe this. So, Benedict, I see your eyebrows raised.
Well, I always like to disagree with everything on principle. I think I wrote a blog post a week or two ago called sort of Notes on TV, and part of the reason I gave it that title was because you've got 2 or 3 or 4 different blocks here that are all kind of almost independent of each other. So in the USA, there's a question around the control of content and the willingness of cable operators and channel operators and content owners to allow a different consumption model. And there's a lot of industry dynamics that make them very reluctant to do that because, as I said, everybody hates the way US TV works except the US TV industry. And there's a lot of very strong incentives and very strong power relationships that mean you can't just turn up with a new device and somehow get a completely different experience. And then there's a second question around the availability of devices and what kind of device it would be and what the experience would be, presuming for the sake of argument anything you wanted to watch was available on that device. Well, what would that be? Would it be touch? Would it be on the TV? Would it be a tablet? What would that actually mean? And then there's a third question, which is, well, what do people actually want to do, presuming that you had that nirvana of every device, of the right content on the right device? Would people switch all of their viewing over to a pure on-demand experience, or would that make up, 10, 20% of your viewing and you'd still watch scheduled TV? And there's a final one, which is, well, when we say TV, what do we even mean when we say that? And they kind of flow through. And so there are all these kind of separate moving parts around this puzzle of, we've had this communal experience for the last 50, 60, 70 years. And every piece of that is now getting attacked. And there's this very brittle thing around the US TV market structure, and then there's some bunch of problems around what the device is. But presuming you solve all of those, it's still really kind of open-ended as to what that would actually mean.
Mm-hmm. Zal, I want to bring you in, and I don't want to brand you as the attacker, but you did run mobile at Netflix. So you grappled with all these questions that Benedict has laid out, and is he heading off in the wrong direction already, or where do you see the common ground?
Well, I think the definition of television, we're talking about future of television here. It's really interesting because television is essentially just video on a screen, and like you said, it's what device is it on, what content are you viewing, and is it linear or is it time shifted or whatever the case might be. And I think at Netflix we saw that growing shift to mobile. We saw that growing shift to not only from the TV linear programming model, but I think more than 60% of streaming hours on Netflix are coming from the major game consoles. So even the game consoles are getting into it with PS3, Xbox, Wii, etc. So it's not even the native software on TVs that are driving this, but actually the hook-in. So I think television is an interesting term, but whether we talk about the future of video or the future of television, I think we're talking about video entertainment on any device.
Yeah, I think there's a kind of a principal point, which is you're going to move towards more of a curve. That is to say, the economics of broadcast TV led you to certain types of content and certain types of schedules, just as the economics of the printing press led you to books had to be over a certain length and magazines had to be over a certain size, and so on. And so you have some different things around, you have long-tail content. But you also have, if you look at, for example, the BBC does stats for iPlayer consumption, and you look at the viewing, and it's all, the top soap operas, the top TV shows, and it's all catch up for what was on in the last 7 days. So there's this sort of fantasy that, and again, the same thing you see for Netflix. Actually, most of what people want to watch is concentrated in quite a small segment where the economics get concentrated. It's almost like it's L-shaped rather than a curve.
That's right. I think, the hits are really starting to drive, I think, Netflix's business, which is why they realize that they can spend $100 million to actually fund a total of 26 episodes across 2 seasons for House of Cards. Actually, it's probably much more than $100 million. I heard from Kevin Spacey in an interview that it was much more than $5 million an episode to even fund that thing. So I think, Netflix has moved from a movie, streaming company into a TV streaming company, and that's just happened in the last few years. And I think people want that short form content. They want to be able to watch that anywhere, anytime. And they want to be able to do that either in one at a time or back to back to back. And I think many people, including myself, did a marathon weekend when season 2 came out of House of Cards.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that Netflix went from posting you 10-year-old content to basically streaming stuff live. So kind of they've moved all the way along the release cycle up to, it's up today and you watch it all at once. I mean, there's a sort of set of questions around, how that stuff gets made, because Netflix obviously have data and Amazon has data, and the TV companies traditionally didn't have data and used the sort of pilot system to work out, well, what are we going to make? And so there's arguments about how you can make programming more efficiently. But at the same time, it's still, as you said, hundreds of millions of dollars to make this stuff. I remember somebody coming up to me and saying, well, what would it take to completely disrupt the US TV market? How much would you have to spend? And I'm like, I don't know, $10 billion, $20 billion. It's the same as, well, how much would it cost me to build a nationwide cellular network with Wi-Fi? It's like, $20, $30 billion. Yeah. That's what it costs. So the money, and there's always this sort of misperception that you can turn up with technology and disrupt it. But actually, the point of Netflix and the reason why the existing model is so strong is it's the content that's the lock on all of this stuff. And having the business model to make the most amount of money possible out of that content is the crucial thing, which incidentally is why I don't think it makes any sense for... come at it slightly differently. You have Apple and Google and various other people talking about commissioning content.
Yahoo,
et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, right.
And the question is, well, is what you're talking about seeding your platform so that it will be a bit more attractive to consumers? Or are you actually saying, do you know what, we're going to be a TV company and spend billions and billions of dollars to really go in and play in that space?
So let's talk about that. How is the relationship between the likes of Netflix, HBO, Comcast and other cable providers, satellite for that matter, changed? So there's the content creators, there's the pipes, there's these technology companies, ostensibly, who are now getting into original content. Has anything changed in that sort of dynamic?
I think people are realizing that original content programming is the way to go. I mean, Yahoo I think today or yesterday announced that they are looking at purchasing the rights of 4 television shows. And, as Yahoo and Marissa Mayer are trying to figure out how to become, a world-leading content and media company once again, it may be the direction to go, but it's going to be costly. It's not going to be cheap. Now, House of Cards is a very, very well-produced program at $5 to $6 million an episode. You might be able to get away with it at $700,000 an episode, but what does that actually lead to in terms of quality for the viewer? And I think these large companies realize in order to obtain that audience that they need to be able to put out great content, obviously. And so there are certain let's talk about YouTube for a second, actually. So Maker Studios was just recently purchased by Disney for $500 million, with another $450 million if they meet the aggressive goals. And they've got whatever it was, I think over 50,000 channels on YouTube across almost 400 million subscribers across that content. And so they've aggregated content and the very best of the content to create a platform that is actually quite monetizable on YouTube and other platforms. And so you could do it the subscriber way, or you could do it the ad modeled way. The point is, you need to be able to attract the best and brightest talent.
Well, the point is, there's kind of a virtuous circle in the TV business in that you have audience and therefore you have revenue and therefore you have great content and therefore you have audience. And you need to make a decision as to how much money you want to inject into that cycle. The analogy that I use is a bit like orbital mechanics. If you want to get into orbit, you need to burn an enormous pile of kerosene. And the higher you want to go, the more kerosene you have to burn. And it doesn't really matter what engine you're using, basically, as long as it doesn't blow up on the pad. It's fundamentally, it's all about the weight of kerosene that you burn and the energy and the chemistry and the physics of that. And you want to go to a higher orbit, you have to burn more kerosene. You can't design a better rocket. And TV industry is kind of like that. You can't turn up with a better rocket. You just have to, actually, all you have to do is turn up with an enormous tank full of kerosene. You have to turn up with an awful lot of money.
That's right.
And the puzzle for me in these technology companies getting into this is to ask, well, what are you actually trying to achieve? So, again, I'm sort of, at the risk of overloading this with more metaphors, I wrote a blog post about telecoms in which I said that, there's this old story that somebody decides that the train service between London and Cambridge is terrible, so they're going to build a bus service. And then they decide that actually to make the economics work, they need to get 8 buses linked together. And then they need to raise a bunch of money and build a dedicated road from London to Cambridge. And the point of the joke is that you need to decide what it is you're trying to do. Like, buses are better than trains because they're more flexible and, you can, all about a bunch of reasons. But actually, if you want to compete with a train service, you're going to end up building a train service. And you might as well face up to that at the beginning and say, well, are we actually planning to invest what it would cost to become NBC Universal? Because the only way you're going to become NBC Universal is by spending that much money. And so then you say, well, actually, if you want to do that, maybe you should just buy NBC Universal. And then you say, well, why would you do that, though? Why would Yahoo buy NBC Universal? Why would they buy CBS? What would be the point of Yahoo or Apple or Google owning that business? Why would CBS be worth more if Google owned it?
Well, I think it's the data. On
so then the question
right?
is, well, is it, and how far down that line do you want to go? And so this is my question about what Yahoo and sort of Netflix, I think, is slightly different because Netflix is kind of a cable channel. Mm-hmm. Netflix is in the content business that happens to use technology to do interesting and new and disruptive ways to things. Whereas for Google or for Yahoo or for Apple, the question is, well, what are you actually trying to do? Are you trying to build a content business here? Or are you trying to sell devices or get more people engaged in your ecosystem? And if it's the latter, then, well, you're going to put a few interesting pieces of content in there to make your device a bit more appealing relative to the PS3. Or to make your Apple TV more appealing relative to the Amazon Fire. Or you're going to buy a bit more content so the Amazon Fire device will seem a bit more appealing relative to the Apple TV, and that will get you more customers for Amazon Fresh.
Yeah.
And so what is it you're trying to achieve here? Are you trying to build a train system, or do you want to have or do you just want to have a simple, nice little local bus service that has a whole bunch of other objectives? Because as I said, actually, if you want to be NBC Universal, Google isn't going to do that any better than NBC.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. No, I think with Netflix and some of these other large providers, I think as far as technology companies go, they're using data to actually figure out what the right thing is.
Yeah, exactly. But they're great. They're building a great content company.
That's right. They're focused on that. That is their goal. Absolutely.
So the future of television sounds like the present and the past.
Well, I mean, there's a question here we haven't really talked about, which is, and this is the thing that occurs to me looking at the Fire TV thing, which is if you look at what happened to the music business, music was an ecosystem battleground, and it's turned into a checkbox commodity feature that you throw into any new product as like something you have to have. You're launching a phone, you're launching this, you've got to have a phone in music service. But nobody really cares anymore because it's all gone streaming, there's no switching cost, so it's become a generic commodity. And now it feels like maybe the ecosystem battleground has moved on to TV. And so it's Apple or it's Google or it's Amazon. Facebook doesn't have a TV product for some reason, presumably. I don't know what the next $10 billion deal Zuck will do. He'll go out and buy Netflix. But you look at the Fire TV and how many different TV services are on that? There's like 10, 15. That was it's the funny thing in the UK, Amazon is fighting a battle to the death with Netflix and, with really super aggressive pricing, trying to squeeze Netflix out of the UK market. In the US, that's not really the point at all. It's just Amazon Video, Netflix Video, whatever. Get them on the device and get them to buy groceries from us. Get them to buy diapers from us. Get them to buy headphones from us. And the TV is the loss leader. So there's this question around, as I said, what is the purpose of this, and what is the end game for how valuable the TV distribution platform becomes?
Yeah, I think so I think there's going to be a monumental Supreme Court case that's going to start in 2 weeks with Aereo, right? So if you don't know what Aereo is, that's like basically they lease you an individual antenna, and you can actually stream that content from any device from anywhere based on that. And they're going up against the big dogs, the NFL, MLB, the ABC. All these guys are thinking this is going to be over the top retransmission, and so they're trying to fight against it. But
it's a lovely hack. It's a lovely hack. It's a regulatory hack. It's like Nextel.
That's right. But aren't some of the best software businesses based on regulatory hacks?
Yeah, but the question about regulatory hacks is whether you're cutting through some sort of fake pricing structure to get to the real underlying economics, or whether you're just hacking the pricing scheme.
Yeah.
Long distance is a great example of that, where there was no reason why long distance was as expensive as it was anymore. But there's other things where, people can just change the rules. You're dependent on, you're basically exploiting a piece of marketing that other people have done, and they can just change that and cut you off. So there's a puzzle there around how all of that US content gets unlocked. But then the broader question, as we say, is, well, supposing it does all get unlocked, well, what is the device experience like? Is it Fire? Is it Apple TV? And the puzzle I have around all of these devices is they're all sort of pre-iPod. It feels like they're all sort of, it's like the joke, I'm playing all the right notes, not necessarily in the right order. You've got all of the kind of the pieces are there, but the usage is still really low relative to TV. And particularly if you look at the UK, you can have, all the stuff we've been talking about, the availability of content. That issue doesn't apply at all in the UK. So all the broadcasters that you would want to watch, all your stuff is there on any device at any time in any way. There's no screwing around. And yet the viewing is, the peak viewing for iPlayer, which is basically all the BBC's content, is like 750,000 streams. And peak TV viewing is like 25 million. And the TV viewing isn't going down. And the iPlayer viewing is always kind of going up a bit, but it ain't no hockey stick. So are we waiting for the right device? Are we waiting for that experience? Or is there like a consumer demand desire problem in here?
Well, I think, and you spoke about it, and I know others have as well, as far as like, dumb glass internet machines, essentially. And that's kind of what Google and Netflix did together in the kind of the formation of Dial, which is that discovery and launch open source protocol that says take anything, whether it's a smartphone, a laptop, or a tablet, etc., and be able to stream that into any other device, right? And so Chromecast is based off of the Dial standards. Netflix's MDX, multi-device experience, is based off of the Dial standards. And obviously the rival is Apple AirPlay, right? And so, but these kinds of scenarios where I can take anything that's kind of that I use regularly, whether it's my phone, my tablet, or my computer, and be able to port that and show that content on any on any screen, incling
you can
the favorite television.
You can squirt it to the TV, as Steve Ballmer's wonderful phrase.
Well, on that note, it sounds to me that the future of television, Benedict, you're still waiting for the right device, the right experience, and until then, we get more of the same in some sense.
Well, we do, but then there's that. There's this kind of, again, it's a kind of the music industry question is, we're kind of fixated on, I've got to pay for all these channels that I don't want. But the more interesting thing is, well, if you can pick arbitrarily which shows you want, then what does that do to all the other shows? So it's not really the unbundling, which of course is Netflix, is a puzzle for Netflix as well, but it's not really the unbundling of ESPN from AMC, it's the unbundling of Mad Men from AMC that's the question. If you go to, well, everything's there on demand and it's all ad supported and a lot of this stuff is free ad supported, then what happens to all the other stuff? And when the TV channel can see in a really, really detailed way, nobody's watching that show, then a lot of those purchasing decisions start to change and commissioning decisions start to change. I mean, you can see it obviously with the way Netflix is using data now. But you have a question, well, how much TV will get made? And how much TV will get watched? And how much of the TV that you watch now, because it's on at 8 o'clock on a Saturday night, but you'd never actually go in, no matter what the interface was, you'd never have chosen to watch that. You'd never watch, celebrity backside wiping with Ryan Seacrest, but it's there, so you watch it. So how do it's, and again, it's an analog with the CD business. The 2 tracks you want and the 10 you don't. How does that whole business change when you can choose anything you want?
That's right. I mean, there was 2 metrics at Netflix that every product manager was geared toward. It's subscriber retention and streaming hours. The most highly correlated variable to subscriber retention was streaming hours, right?
Yeah.
And so our job was, as soon as you open up the app, diving straight into content, right? And so that's why we introduced the new continue watching row, because we realized that people are in the middle of watching something. They may not be, extremely excited about the content, but listen, they're in the middle of it. It's on there. It's at the top of the home screen. Let me click on it and let me just start playing it because I've had a long day and I just want to continue watching it at 8 o'clock at night, which is very similar to kind of the linear programming model that we see in traditional television.
Well, it's like the the Letterman argument that he didn't get the ratings of Leno because of there was a different lead-in before Leno versus before Letterman. That all of a sudden those people are going to be saying, well, those guys at Netflix, they're screwing me because I'm not in the right place in the algorithm.
Well, gentlemen, we will continue watching this. Sorry, Zal, for a bad pun. And I thank you guys for coming, Benedict and Zal.
Thank you.
Thank you.